I watched my mother's best friend destroy our entire family with just 7 words, and she didn't even know she'd done it. Let me take you back to where it all began. My name is Grace, and I'm 12 years old. I live in a neighborhood called Sunshine Estate with my parents and my little brother, Michael. Our estate is the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, where your neighbor's cooking smell tells you what's for dinner before you even ask, where children play football in the street until the street lights come on, where secrets don't exist because somebody is always watching, always listening, always talking. And nobody talked more than Mrs. Ojibala. She lived 3 houses away from us, in the yellow house with the red gate. Every morning, she would stand outside that gate with her arms folded across her chest, watching the world go by. By afternoon, she'd moved to Mrs. Kamara's shop at the corner. By evening, she was at the community borehole, bucket in hand, mouth running like water from a broken pipe. We called her Radio behind her back. Even my mother called her that, though she'd smile and wave whenever Mrs. Ojibala walked past our house. "Good morning, Sister Rose," Mrs. Ojibala would shout, her voice loud enough to wake the entire street. "Morning, Mrs. Ojibala," my mother would reply, polite but distant. My father didn't like her. He never said it directly, but I could tell from the way his jaw tightened whenever her name came up at dinner. "That woman talks too much," he'd mutter, shaking his head. "One day, her mouth will put her in trouble." I didn't understand what he meant back then. I do now. It started on a Wednesday. I remember because Wednesday was market day, and my mother always went to the big market to buy food for the week. That morning, she'd left early with her shopping bags and a smile on her face. My father had traveled to another city for work, so it was just me, Michael, and our housemaid, Auntie Blessing, at home. Around noon, I heard shouting outside. I ran to the window and peeked through the curtain. Mrs. Ojibala was standing in the middle of the street, talking to 3 other women. Her voice was high and excited, the way it always got when she had fresh news to share. I couldn't hear everything, but I caught fragments. I'm telling you, I saw her myself, with a man. The other women leaned in closer, their eyes wide. Which man? Not her husband. Oh, a different man entirely. My stomach twisted. Something felt wrong. Where did you see them? At the hotel. The one near the main road. I went there for a meeting, and I saw her coming out with him. They were laughing and talking. Very close. Too close. One of the women gasped. "Are you sure it was her? Am I blind? I know Sister Rose when I see her." My heart stopped. Sister Rose. My mother. I stumbled back from the window, my hands shaking. It couldn't be true. My mother would never. But Mrs. Ojibala's voice kept going, louder now, feeding the hungry ears around her. I didn't want to believe it myself, but what I saw, I saw. Maybe that's why her husband travels so much. Maybe he knows something we don't know. The women murmured amongst themselves, their heads bobbing like birds pecking at seeds. I wanted to run outside and scream at them. I wanted to tell them they were wrong, that my mother was good, that Mrs. Ojibala was lying. But I was 12, and I was scared. By evening, the story had grown wings. Mrs. Kamara, the shop owner, mentioned it to Mrs. Bello, who told her daughter, who told her friends at school. Mr. Tund, the estate chairman, heard it from his wife, who'd heard it at the borehole. Even Pastor John's wife had caught wind of it by the time she came to drop off some books for my mother. And with each retelling, the story changed. I heard she's been seeing him for months. Someone said they have a child together. I always knew something was off about that woman. Too quiet. Quiet people are the most dangerous. My mother came home that evening with her shopping bags, humming a song under her breath. She looked happy, peaceful. She had no idea. I wanted to tell her. I wanted to warn her that the entire estate was talking about her, that Mrs. Ojibala had planted a seed that was now a wild, choking vine. But I didn't know how. So I stayed quiet. The next morning, everything changed. My mother stepped outside to sweep the front of our house, the way she did every morning. But this time, The street was different. The women who usually greeted her warmly now looked away. Mrs. Bello, who always stopped to chat, crossed to the other side of the road. Even the children playing football seemed quieter, their eyes darting toward her and then away, like she was something dangerous. My mother noticed. I saw the confusion flicker across her face, the way her smile faltered. But she kept sweeping, kept humming, kept pretending everything was fine. It wasn't. By mid-morning, Mrs. Kamara refused to sell her bread. "We don't have any left," she said coldly, even though there were 6 loaves sitting right there on the counter. My mother stared at her, hurt flashing in her eyes. "Mrs. Kamara, is something wrong?" "Nothing is wrong. I just don't have bread." My mother left the shop quietly, her shoulders slightly hunched. I followed her from a distance, my chest tight with anger and helplessness. That afternoon, my father came home early. I was in my room doing homework when I heard his voice, sharp and loud. "Rose, what is this I'm hearing?" I crept to the top of the stairs and peeked down. My mother was standing in the living room, her face pale. "What are you talking about?" "People are saying you were seen with another man. At a hotel." Her eyes went wide.
"What?
"That's not true."
Who told you that?"
"Does it matter? The whole estate is talking about it." "But it's a lie. I've never." "Then why are people saying it?" His voice cracked, and I realized with a shock that he was scared. Scared of losing her. Scared of what people thought. Scared that maybe, just maybe, it was true. "I don't know." My mother's voice broke. "I don't know why anyone would say that. I haven't done anything wrong." My father ran his hands over his face. "This is a disaster. Do you know what this means for me? For my job? For our family? So you believe them?" Her voice was small now, wounded. "You believe strangers over your own wife?" He didn't answer. That silence was louder than any words. By the end of the week, my mother stopped leaving the house. She stopped sweeping the front yard, stopped going to the market, stopped attending church. She would sit in the living room, staring at nothing, her hands folded in her lap. Sometimes I'd see her wipe her eyes quickly when she thought no one was looking. Michael asked me once, "Why is Mommy sad?" I didn't know what to tell him. My father started coming home later and later. When he was home, he barely spoke to her. The air in our house felt heavy, like something was pressing down on all of us, making it hard to breathe. And outside, the talking continued. I heard her husband is planning to divorce her.
Poor man.
Imagine the shame. I always said she was too proud. Pride comes before a fall. Mrs. Ojibla, meanwhile, had moved on to other stories. She didn't seem to notice, or care, what her words had done. Then came the flood. It happened on a Saturday night. The rain started around 6 p.m., heavy and relentless. By 9 p.m., water was pouring into the streets. By midnight, it was waist-deep. Our house sat on higher ground, so we were safe. But many others weren't. I heard the screams first, high-pitched and terrified. "Help! The water is inside the house. My children! Someone help my children!" My father grabbed a flashlight and ran outside. My mother, despite everything, didn't hesitate. She tied a wrapper around her waist and followed him into the rain. I watched from the window as our neighbors poured out of their homes, wading through the muddy water, shouting instructions, pulling each other to safety. And there, in the middle of it all, was Mrs. Ojibla. She was trapped on the roof of her house, clutching her 2 young children, screaming for help. The water had risen too fast. Her husband was out of town. She was alone.
Please.
Somebody. My children can't swim.
People hesitated.
I saw them glance at each other, unsure. Mrs. Ojibla had talked about all of them at some point.
Spread their secrets.
Made their lives harder. Why should they help her now? But then my mother stepped forward. She waded through the water, her face set with determination. My father tried to stop her. "Rose, don't. It's too dangerous." She shook her head. Those are children. I can't just stand here. She reached Mrs. Ojibola's house and called up to her. Throw the children down. I'll catch them. Mrs. Ojibola hesitated, tears streaming down her face. Trust me, my mother said firmly. One by one, Mrs. Ojibola lowered her children into my mother's arms. My mother carried them to safety, her body shaking from the effort, her breath coming in gasps. Then she went back for Mrs. Ojibola. By the time it was over, half the estate had gathered, watching in stunned silence as my mother pulled Mrs. Ojibola onto dry ground. Mrs. Ojibola collapsed in the mud, sobbing. Thank you. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
I'm so sorry. My mother looked at her for a long moment. Then she turned and walked away. The next morning, something shifted. Mrs. Bello came to our house with a basket of fruit. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I should have known better than to listen to gossip. Mrs. Kamara sent her daughter with fresh bread. Tell your mother we were wrong. One by one, people came. Some apologized. Some just looked ashamed. But the damage was done. My mother accepted their words with grace, but I could see it in her eyes. The trust was broken. The innocence was gone. And Mrs. Ojibola? She stopped talking. For the first time in years, the estate was quiet. What happens next will change everything. In part 2, secrets unravel. The truth comes to light, and Mrs. Ojibola faces a choice that will define the rest of her life. Will redemption be possible? Or has too much been destroyed? Asterisk. The silence didn't last. 3 days after the flood, Mrs. Ojibola came to our house. She stood at the gate, her hands clasped together, her head bowed. She looked smaller somehow, like the storm had washed away more than just mud. My mother saw her from the window and sighed. For a moment, I thought she wouldn't open the door. But then she did. Good afternoon, Sister Rose, Mrs. Ojibola said softly. My mother didn't respond. She just stood there, waiting. I came to apologize. Properly. Not just for the other night, but for everything. Mrs. Ojibola's voice cracked. I know what I did. I know what my words did to you. Do you? My mother's voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. Do you really know? Mrs. Ojibola flinched. I didn't mean for it to go so far. I saw you that day, and I thought. You thought what? My mother cut her off. That you knew my life better than I did? That your eyes couldn't be wrong? That it was your place to tell the whole world something you didn't even bother to confirm? Mrs. Ojibola's face crumpled. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't erase what happened, my mother said. Sorry doesn't give me back the week I spent crying in my room. Sorry doesn't fix my marriage or my reputation. I know. Mrs. Ojibola was crying now, big tears rolling down her cheeks. I know I can't fix it, but I need you to know that I was wrong. Completely wrong. My mother stared at her for a long moment. Then she said, Who was the woman you saw that day? Mrs. Ojibola blinked, confused. What? At the hotel. Who was the woman you saw? I thought it was you. But it wasn't. Mrs. Ojibola's face went pale. I was sure. You were wrong, my mother said quietly. I wasn't even in that area that day. I was at the market like I always am on Wednesdays. You saw someone who looked like me, and you decided it was me. You didn't check. You didn't ask. You just talked. Mrs. Ojibola covered her mouth with her hand, her whole body trembling. Do you understand now? My mother asked. Do you see what your carelessness did? Mrs. Ojibola nodded, unable to speak. My mother's expression softened, just a little. I forgive you, Mrs. Ojibola. But forgiveness doesn't mean things go back to how they were. You need to learn from this. You need to change. Mrs. Ojibola nodded again, tears still streaming. I will. I promise. She turned to leave, but my mother called after her. Mrs. Ojibola? She looked back. Thank you for letting me save your children that night. They didn't deserve to suffer for your mistakes. Mrs. Ojibola's face broke completely. She whispered something I couldn't hear, and then she was gone. But the story wasn't over, because 2 days later, something else happened. I was coming home from school when I saw a crowd gathered outside Mr. Tun's house. People were shouting, pointing, arguing. I pushed my way through and froze. Mrs. Ojibwa was standing in the middle of the crowd, her face red, her voice loud. I said what I said, and I meant it. Mr. Tund has been collecting estate fees for months, but where is the money? Where are the new streetlights he promised? Where is the security guard? Mr. Tund stood on his porch, his arms crossed. You don't know what you're talking about. Those things take time. Time? Or are you using our money to build your new house? Mrs. Ojibwa shot back. The crowd murmured. Someone shouted, She has a point. Mr. Tund's face darkened. Careful, Mrs. Ojibwa. You of all people should know the danger of running your mouth. The crowd went silent. Mrs. Ojibwa stiffened. For a moment, I thought she'd back down, shrink away like she'd done at our house. But she didn't. You're right, she said clearly. I do know. I know what it's like to speak without thinking, to hurt people with careless words. But I also know the difference between gossip and truth. And what I'm saying now is true. Show us the records, Mr. Tund. Show us where the money went. Mr. Tund's eyes flashed with anger, but he couldn't refuse. Not with everyone watching. He disappeared inside and came back with a ledger. Mrs. Ojibwa took it, her hands steady, and began reading aloud. The numbers didn't match. Money was missing. Lots of it. The crowd erupted. That evening, my mother and I stood on our porch, watching the chaos unfold. She's different, I said quietly. My mother nodded. She's learning. She's learning that words are powerful, and that power can be used for harm or for good. Do you think people will forgive her?
Some will.
Some won't. But what matters is whether she forgives herself and does better. I thought about that for a long time. Over the next few weeks, Mrs. Ojibwa changed. She still talked. She couldn't help that. It was who she was. But now she talked differently. She organized meetings to discuss the estate's problems. She started a group to help mothers who couldn't afford school fees. She visited sick neighbors and brought them food. People began to call her Sister Ao instead of Radio. Some even asked her for advice. And slowly, bit by bit, she earned back what she'd lost. One Sunday afternoon, she came to our house again. This time, my mother invited her in. They sat in the living room, drinking tea, talking quietly. I listened from the stairs. I wanted to thank you, Mrs. Ojibwa said, for saving my children, and for showing me grace when I didn't deserve it. My mother smiled. We all make mistakes, Mrs. Ojibwa. What matters is what we do after. I've been thinking a lot about that, Mrs. Ojibwa said. About words. My grandmother used to say, a word spoken is an arrow released. You cannot call it back. I never understood what she meant. I do now. Words can heal, too, my mother said gently, if we choose them carefully. Mrs. Ojibwa nodded. I'm trying. Every day I'm trying. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Mrs. Ojibwa said, I went to the church last week. I asked the pastor to help me. I told him I needed to learn how to control my tongue. What did he say? He gave me a challenge. Every time I want to say something about someone, I have to ask myself 3 questions. Is it true? Is it kind? Is it necessary? If the answer to any of those is no, I stay silent. My mother's smile widened. That's wise. It's hard, Mrs. Ojibwa admitted. I've been quiet a lot lately, but it feels good. It feels like I'm finally listening instead of just waiting to talk. A month later, something beautiful happened. Mrs. Bellow's daughter got into university, but the family couldn't afford the fees. They were heartbroken, ready to give up. Mrs. Ojibwa heard about it and called a meeting at the community hall. We're a community, she said, standing in front of everyone. We take care of our own. This girl is brilliant. She deserves a chance. Let's give it to her. She started a fundraiser. She went door to door, not gossiping, not prying, just asking for help. Within 2 weeks, they'd raised enough money to cover the first year's fees. Mrs. Bello cried when they handed her the envelope. Thank you. Thank you so much. Mrs. Ajibala hugged her. We're family. That's what family does. I saw my mother watching from the back of the hall, her eyes bright with tears. One evening, as the sun set over Sunshine Estate, I asked my mother, "Do you think Mrs. Ajibala is a good person now?"
My mother thought about it.
I think she always was a good person. She just needed to learn how to use her voice properly. Do you still think about what she said? About you and the hotel? My mother's face grew sad.
Sometimes.
It hurt, Grace. It hurt more than I can explain. But holding on to that hurt would only poison me. She's learned.
She's changed.
That's enough. You're strong, Mom. She pulled me close. No, baby. I'm just choosing peace over bitterness. There's a difference. On the last day of that year, the estate held a big party. There was music, food, laughter. Children ran around playing games. Adults sat in groups, talking, joking, remembering. Mrs. Ajibala stood up and asked for everyone's attention. I want to say something, she began, her voice clear but humble. This year taught me a lesson I'll never forget. I've always loved to talk, but I never thought about the weight of my words. I never realized that my tongue could be a knife or a key, that it could cut people down or lift them up. The crowd was silent, listening. I hurt someone very dear to me this year, she continued, glancing at my mother. I almost destroyed her family with my carelessness. And I will spend the rest of my life making sure I never do that to anyone else again. She paused, her voice thick with emotion. My grandmother used to say, the mouth that eats salt is the same mouth that must drink water. I made things bitter. Now I'm trying to make them sweet.
People clapped.
Some wiped their eyes. My mother stood and walked over to Mrs. Ajibala. She took her hand and squeezed it. You're doing well, Sister Ao, she said softly. Keep going. Mrs. Ajibala smiled through her tears. I will. I promise. Years later, when I think back on that time, I realize something important. Mrs. Ajibala wasn't a villain. She was just human. Flawed, careless, thoughtless, but also capable of change, growth, redemption. She taught me that words matter, that silence can be strength, that listening is more important than speaking. But most of all, she taught me that it's never too late to become better. The woman who talked too much learned to talk with purpose. And in doing so, she found her truest self.